Hello, everybody. I would like to first introduce myself. I am Peter Matchek, the Town of Ashland's Town Planner, and I would like to introduce Emma Snelling, Town of Ashland's Assistant Town Planner. And tonight we're having a presentation and a conversation about our town zoning. Our zoning in the downtown was adopted about 7 to 10 years ago. And back in 2021, the town of Ashland went through a zoning study and we updated our zoning. However, with the downtown revitalization happening and some conversations about future development, we thought it was appropriate at this time to have a hour-long presentation concerning downtown zoning, which we therefore then end up opening everything up to comments and questions. So Emma and myself have put together a quick PowerPoint. That's going to be a quick overview of zoning of the downtown zoning area in Ashland. And then we will have a Q&A session. And then hopefully we will wrap up the meeting around 7 o'clock. So with that said, Emma, do you mind introducing yourself and kicking us off in the PowerPoint?
Okay, can everyone see the presentation? And are you seeing it in presentation mode? Correct? Yeah, I'm seeing nods. Okay, good. Just making sure. So my name is Emma Snellings. I'm the Assistant Town Planner. And yeah, Peter explained why we're here tonight. And let's see. Oh, there we go. So just to make sure that everyone in this information session is kind of starting with the same baseline information. I just wanted to take a minute to go over what zoning bylaws are and what they do. So municipalities can enact zoning laws under their police powers to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community. So that is the goal of zoning regulations. Generally, zoning controls the use of the property and the physical limits of that use. So you might hear the term setbacks or frontages, and that refers to kind of dimensions of the lot. And there's certain rules that built structures need to follow that fall under zoning. We have a zoning map, which we'll show in just a minute, and this identifies where these different regulations apply in town. So the map is a part of the zoning law. And so basically zoning is the basis of understanding between property owners and their communities about what's considered an acceptable use of their land and what's an acceptable use of their neighbor's land. And so that's so everyone can understand, what their neighbors might do, what they're able to do, and make sure everyone is on the same page about those uses. So now zoning in Ashland. So in Massachusetts, the Zoning Enabling Act was passed in 1953. And so this was a law from the state that said municipalities can adopt their own zoning. So before that, it was a bit more of a patchwork. There were some court cases that challenged whether municipalities could have zoning. The courts decided they could, and so the state legislatures acted. Ashland passed their first zoning bylaw in 1954. If you would like to read it, I would be happy to send you the PDF. It is 4 pages long. So they were quick and to the point in 1954. Now, when you print out our bylaws, we're clocking in right around, I think, 170 pages. So things have gotten a bit more defined, we'll say. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the zoning map is a part of the bylaw. This is a screenshot from the People GIS online mapping system that Ashland has. You can find a link to this on the planning department webpage. It's pretty interesting. You can view different parcels, see what zones they're in. So, if you like maps, it's a great tool. So what we're looking at, each different color is a different zone. You'll see a list of the different zones on the side. It looks like a lot. There's a few zones that have sub-districts, including the downtown district, and we'll get into that later. But so this is a general overview of the zoning. Now you'll note that most of the town is that, kind of light yellow, and that is the residential A district. 84% of the town is in the residential A, residential B, or multifamily residential zone. So that makes up the bulk of Ashland's zoning districts. And perhaps it's no surprise that because the bulk of Ashland is in those residential zoning districts, single family homes make up the largest share of Ashland's housing stock at 79%, 58% of which are detached and 21% attached. So just a fun fact. Okay, so as I mentioned before, there are different zoning types, each reflected by a different color on the map. Zoning districts typically fall into one of two categories: residential, as I mentioned, so RA, RB, and RM are 84% of town, and then commercial industrial. And so you can see that we have 5 commercial industrial zones in town. And then there's special districts, and special districts are generally a mix of residential and commercial uses. Sometimes they have a specific purpose, like the quarry remediation district. And there's also overlay districts, which aren't listed here. So some of you might be familiar with like the Pond Street mixed use overlay district, which is an overlay district often overlying the highway commerce zone. And ADD, the Ashland Downtown District, also has an overlay district as one of its subdistricts. And I know that's a lot, but we will get into the subdistricts and what an overlay district means. But all that to say, there are different districts. They each have different goals and different uses allowed in them. So now I will turn it over to Peter to talk about the purpose of the Ashland Downtown District.
All right, thank you, Emma. So the town of Ashland, going back doing some research, between 2010 and 2015, the town of Ashland really started to look into doing a study on the downtown area. And in this instance, the town of Ashland incorporated what are known as form-based codes into the zoning bylaw. And the form-based codes are a planning theory of zoning, or planning type of zoning that brings form into shape into the downtown area. And in this instance, the zoning codes were implemented to kind of spell out what the town of Ashland was interested in when people were making investments within their property. So this purpose, which is on the screen right now, comes from the original rezoning of the downtown, which happened in around 2014-15. And so this was passed by at town meeting by the residents. This purpose did not change in 2021. So this is the original purpose going back to the implementation of the current zoning districts, which incorporate some of the form-based codes. But I just kind of wanted to go through this purpose to kind of tie it back to what the original thought process was by the planning board, the select board, and obviously the citizens of Ashland at the time. And so the purpose is really to develop, to encourage growth and development of a successful downtown area. I think that's what everybody wants, is a downtown area with a walkable environment, with vibrant, active uses, right? The uses at the storefront level to initiate that engagement for the residents as one visits the downtown, to initiate commerce, to create a vibrant place for commercial, retail, and residents. In this case, bringing residents into the downtown, allowing this to take place. The purpose number 2 would be, as states in the purpose, is to broaden the tax base, right? To create new investments, new revenue, while providing long-term economic viability for the town of Ashland and to improve the quality of life for people living in the downtown or in close proximity to the downtown, or Ashland residents that are in the downtown looking for goods and services as a place to work and shop on a daily basis. And so then, going, further down to the purpose, I think some of these can really be touched upon to reduce auto dependency. Back in 2015, I don't think we were paying $5 a gallon for gas. However, going back and looking at this now, they had to force the wherewithal to think about these issues. One element I do want to touch upon is the civic engagement piece. And one of the purposes of the original bylaw, as adopted, it says entrepreneurship, downtown cooperation, civic engagement. The town has two great opportunities. We've had two great areas since 2015 time period when we adopted this. But we can think of the town farmers market. That's a great opportunity, and the town has succeeded with developing a very high quality farmers market. And then also the corner spot has brought civic engagement to the downtown, to the area. This would also include the Riverwalk. And so with the plans and with the zoning, the town of Ashland has been able to build upon what the town and the planning board and the select board were thinking about back in 2015 with some great pieces. And so I just wanted to touch upon those and highlight those. But overall, this is the purpose was to really provide a long-term economic viability for the downtown with vibrant and active uses as the properties are redeveloped and invested in. And this goes back to what has been done since the adoption, and obviously is here to help guide all decisions. Can we go to the next slide, Emma? So the Ashland Downtown District is, and there's a couple of sub-districts, really three sub-districts, the sub-district A, B, and C. And the purpose of the sub-districts is to allow a mixture of land uses that are feasible and appropriate within proximity to obviously the downtown and the functionality of the sites and the development trends, etc. So number one, the sub-districts focus on the site, the building design, and it requires to promote attractive and functional development, right? I think those are the two key words, or three words, excuse me, that we really want to highlight are attractive and functional development. And those are great elements. The second point would be to allow the greater flexibility, right? So as people come in and propose projects, they are allowed to propose something that will work, right? And it's really the town's job and the planning board's job and the citizens' job is to make sure that whatever investments are made are in the best interest of the town of Ashland, but will also be in the best interest of the proposed developer and or investor to create that relationship. The third point is to foster a pedestrian-friendly downtown. So with that said, our investments that the town is making right now within the downtown are doing so. And I know everyone on this call is interested in the downtown, and as the downtown revitalization happens and the ongoing, I just want to give a quick update that I'm sure people see right now that Eversource is pulling the electrical wires underneath the streets into the piping that they've worked so hard in implementing for the last 12 to 18 months. And hopefully in the next few weeks, we're going to see the contractors build and or start on the curb work in the downtown area, so everyone can start to see how wide the sidewalks will be. And then the work will take place so on with the landscaping and lighting elements to follow. So one element I do want to touch on is with the changes, well, I'll keep it going. So can we go to the next slide? So this is a current zoning map of the downtown. Here we see subdistrict A, B, and C. One element I do want to point out that subdistrict A is a overlay district, and which overlays a couple different districts. And then sub areas B and C are actually base zoning. And so that is the zoning for those lots in particular. Subdistrict A is a overlay district with a different zoning district underneath. And that was done back when this changes to the zoning were actually adopted. And there were no changes to the zoning map proposed in 2021 when the updates occurred. The updates in 2021, which we'll touch upon, really looked at the buildings, the functionality, some dimensional regulations, but in no way did we go, did we change any of the sub-districts A, B, or C from a land perspective.
And Peter, if I could just add that with overlay districts, because I don't think I mentioned it earlier, a property owner can choose which set of regulations they develop their property under, whether it is that base zoning or whether it's the overlay district. So there's a choice involved if you're in the hashed areas.
Yes, it is correct. All right, so the three sub-districts. Subdistrict A is obviously the overlay district, as we just spoke of, but that is designed to promote the highest level of mixed-use development, which encourages retail on the first floor. These and will promote commercial, while you have residential on the top floor and on the floors above that retail on the first and on the second and third floors. And so that was subdistrict A. Subdistrict B was designed to promote a mix of uses where feasible, especially commercial retail on the first floor with residential on the upper floors. Subdistrict B is a step back from A, and then subdistrict C allowed for a mix of uses where feasible, but at a lower density level than A, B, C. So A, B, and C on the map, as shown, are really are there, and it's just to differentiate between the density levels and the density of the mix of uses. Next slide. So these are a zoning map. These are two zoning maps, and I just went to the top clip of the zoning map. Differentiate, or it takes a look at the ADDA, which is the overlay district. In this case, you can see the overlay district of ADDA covers 10 to 50 Main Street. Also, it covers the area down on Front Street, which runs down Front Street in between the railroad tracks. That would also be the area where Needham Bank is located and the municipal parking lot and the municipal owned land where the farmers market is now posted. Across Main Street, this area also includes the police and fire station and town hall, running up to the train tracks. And then there is a portion over and off of Front Street here. On the other end, the overlay district also covers Pleasant Street, which runs east to west. So this covers the southern side of Pleasant Street, all the way down to the railroad station. Next slide.
Okay, so as Peter mentioned, the downtown district recently underwent an evaluation and an update, which was passed at the spring 2021 town meeting. So Ashland got a grant and contracted with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, also known as MAPC. They came in and helped us do a community-wide survey, which got over 300 responses. And they also facilitated a number of meetings with the planning board. And in the end, they suggested several changes, which included reformatting the bylaw, kind of improving the graphics, which you will see soon in the bylaw, clarifying some unclear provisions, adding some new design standards, and modifying some dimensional standards. And all of those changes were based on the feedback received through the survey and from the planning board through the meetings. So now we're about to dive into some of the standards and some of the design requirements of the downtown district. These are fairly unique in Ashland to the downtown district. Most of the other districts don't have these high, building standards, but the downtown district gets more specific. We will sometimes reference what has been changed in the 2021 amendments. And a good portion of it did stay the same. So it wasn't a complete overhaul, but there were some changes, and we'll kind of go through those as well as the high points of all the standards. So to start with is the dimensional standards. So dimensional standards regulate the location and the size of a structure on a property. So every zoning district has a frontage requirement. That's the length of the property line along a street. It has a lot size requirement, front yard, we'll call it front yard setback. So the distance between the front of the lot and the structure, a side yard setback, and a rear yard setback. The Ashland Downtown District has an FAR requirement, which is a floor area ratio. And again, this is something that does not exist in every zoning district in Ashland. And again, it's just to control some of the density of a site, and then height requirements. So these were changed in the recent update. You'll see before 2021, most of the sub areas allowed 0 side yard setbacks. So buildings could be right up to the property line. We now allow it if it's a common wall, but 15 feet if it is not a common wall. So we clarified that setback requirement. In some of the sub areas, the front yard setback was just a flat 15 feet. And now we've given a range. So developers can be more responsive to their specific property. So you'll see that the front yard could be between 8 and 15 feet. And some are 15 feet no matter what. And then the other big change to the dimensional standard is height. So in a number of in sub area A and B for mixed use and commercial buildings, a building could be 4 stories high. And instead, this was brought down to 3 stories. And we also added a definition saying that 3 stories means a maximum of 38 feet. Because before, stories wasn't clearly defined in the bylaw, and we just wanted to make that clear for everyone. So this is the dimensional standards as they stand now for the downtown district. And then the other standards, so we just went over the dimensional standards, and the ADD has a lot of other standards as well. So the ADD has performance standards, which Wildwood mixed use might have, but most of the districts don't have. In the downtown, the performance standards emphasize the suitability and impact of a development. And all these standards are things that a developer needs to consider, and then the planning board needs to consider when they evaluate a project for a special permit. There are design standards, and so that's looking at overall, not just the building, we'll get into that, but just overall the site plan, the proposal, the use, There's an emphasis on pedestrian access and their experience, and fitting the development into the existing context of the downtown. There are lot standards, which again emphasize sidewalks and pedestrian areas. Every special permit that goes before, or request for special permit that goes before the planning board is considered against 6 special permit criteria. And the ADD adds to those criteria, and they include criteria concerning appropriateness of use, the scale of the development, and the mitigation of impact on town services. And the goals of all these standards is to help ensure that the downtown is developed in a way that is, suitable for the downtown and gets us closer to those goals in the purpose of the downtown bylaw. And then a bulk of the bylaw is building design standards. And so Peter is going to get into the building design standards, but they go over specific aspects of a building's design that helps the building fit into the existing context. So.
Well, thank you, Emma. So I just want to introduce this slide, and it's a slide of 6 buildings. But if you were one of the 300 residents actually took the survey when we were going through the rezoning and the update of the zoning back in 2020, 2021, you'll recognize these 6 buildings. And so these 6 buildings were drawn up through our consultant, but as they toured around town, these 6 buildings really reflected the historical nature and some of the characteristics of what they saw in the town. The top left building has very similar ties to 21 Main Street. And the one thing that we heard from the residents through that survey is everyone really liked that 121 Main Street building and the way it looks and how it acts with the street, 21 Main Street. So a big element of the bylaw update was to look at the historical nature of the architecture of the town of Ashland. And this would include scale, massing, how wide the building is, if there are breaks within the facade, or what are those break points within the facade, concerning setback and/or change in materials. Roof shape was a huge topic of conversation, which I'll touch upon in another slide. Exterior materials. This also includes glazing or the percentile of glass on a building at that first floor facade level. These are all elements that we built in that may not have existed prior to. But the following diagrams are intended to provide inspiration as a general element, but they're not really intended to be exact in the exact buildings that the town of Ashland like to see. But we just took elements and historical, I would say, lines from existing buildings. So these are the 6 buildings actually built into the bylaws at this point. So next slide, please. So going back to the glazing and/or the windows, within the current bylaws, facades shall have windows and doors with high transparency, obviously, so people can look in and look out and kind of have that relationship. There should be, with low reflective glass for a percentile of the total area. And when we get into that street level, those street level buildings, the bylaws at a minimum require 60% of that front facade area to be glazed glass so people can interact with each other. Obviously, this is measured 2 feet up from the ground level and 12 feet up. And so here, that's where the percentile is measured from the 2-foot level to the 12-foot level. And that area would obviously be 60% for a commercial use. And then for a residential use, it would be a required 30%. Window, going around the windows regarding the trim, The trim shall be no less than 3 inches. And so that was something that the planning board looked at and kind of measured some of the historical, I'd say, lines or details that exist around the building, within the existing buildings, and then also looking at what has been built using the town of Ashland bylaws. I just want to note, which probably should touch upon it. There's been 2 developments in the town of Ashland that have been permitted and built using this current bylaw. That would be 21 Main Street and then 128 Main Street. And so those are the 2 buildings that everyone can at least reference while thinking about this current form of the downtown Ashland bylaw. Next slide. Here we talk about roofs. And so this description kind of talks about the 5 different types of roofs. We have a hip roof, a side gable, a front gable, and then mansard and a flat roof. And so looking at the building standards, buildings should have one of the following roof types. Our bylaws also talk about the pitch or the angle of each roof. And so there should be a 7:12 ratio. And so this goes to the angle, but the major thing, we do not want to create flat roofs. And so flat roofs are allowed by special permit. So if you look down over on the, the right side of your screen, you see that roofs, the mansard roof and the flat roof are allowed by special permit, which have some elements of a flat roof. And then the hip roof, side gable, and the front gable are allowed by right. However, it may not have a minimum, but all the roofs have a minimum pitch requirement from 7/12, which is a degree of angle. And this is to promote the design and the essence of the character of the neighborhood through the historical and appropriate architectural details. And so, yeah, so, the buildings we wanted to see and the community wanted to see more pitched roofs, and then any flat roofs or mansard roofs are only allowed by special permit. Next slide. Here we talk about dormers, shed dormers, cross gables, and bay windows. These are all elements that are visually interesting and that reduce the visual bulk of a building if implemented correctly on either within the roof line and or on the building. But all these elements are all have historical ties to New England. And so the town of Ashland built those into our bylaws to reflect historical New England architecture. So bay windows are great, and they're traditionally used in Brahmin architecture. And the town of Ashland built this in. So all these elements are allowed, and they can add a texture to the facades and or sides of a building. Next slide. I just want to touch upon parking before we kind of wrap things up and open it up for questions before we close it out. But within the ADD district, we do have a parking reduction. And so to really look at the slide, which really kind of gets into the bylaws, the number of parking spaces required for each use shall be really 75% of those stated in section 5.1. Section 5.1 of the town of Ashland bylaws pertain to parking. And so depending on the use, that's the overall takings. And so moving down to the second bullet point, for residential buildings, the developer or anybody would be asked to implement 75% of those is the total number. And then for a mixed use of buildings, the parking drops further and it goes to 56% of the required parking spaces. Shared motor vehicle parking is here, and it's showing and encouraging in our bylaws. And the parking spaces for one shall not be considered as provided for the other space. I want to note that in 2021, we did not change any of the parking requirements, and we left that alone. So these parking requirements go back to the original adoption of the town of Ashland downtown zoning district as it currently sits. And you know, and this is fairly common within other downtown districts, I would say, in the Commonwealth, and things that I've studied and that I've seen from a professional level. Emma, do you want to take the last slide?
Sure. So as we look to the future of the Ashland downtown district, there's kind of two big considerations. So one, as Peter mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, is the downtown revitalization project. So this project will affect the look and the feel of downtown. So when the planning board and when any residents considers any proposed projects, it's good to keep in mind all of the changes that will be happening in the downtown over the next couple of years. You know, wider sidewalks, bike lanes, additional streetscaping, and furniture. The final downtown revitalization plans are available on the Ashland town website. And so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the planning department about what, you know, any areas are going to look like in the future. And finally, when MAPC wrapped up their assessment of the downtown zoning and their evaluation, they were left with a few recommendations for things that the town can look at in this bylaw in the future. And so some of those were, you know, outside the scope of the evaluation. And those included looking at the boundaries of the downtown district and seeing if they needed to be changed. Looking at the minimum lot size and minimum frontage of the districts, seeing if they align with the existing lot sizes. Another issue that could be looked at in the future is whether it would be beneficial to convert the A sub-district from an overlay district to a base zoning district. And finally, whether there should be an open space requirement for the Ashland downtown district. So the changes that happened in 2021 certainly helped to clarify the downtown district and helped provide some additional input into the design standards and the building standards in the bylaw. And so that hopefully will produce projects that you know, fit the purpose of the bylaw in a great way. But there's always work to be done. You know, zoning is a living document. So as we look out over the next few years, there may be more evaluation of this district.
All right, thank you, Emma. So with that said, this can kind of, we're going to open it up to a Q&A session. So if Mark is already done, he's raised his hand.
So can we just encourage people to use the raise hand feature in Zoom if you have a question? And also, I'm going to take the PowerPoint down, but if you'd like me to put up any slide that relates to your question, just let me know.
Obviously, we'll take questions. We'll hopefully until 7 and or maybe a little bit after. And then I also just want to let people know that I'm in town hall. Emma and I are in town hall every day. So if anybody has any questions or wants to stop by and talk to us face to face, please feel free. Our offices are in the second floor in the Department of Municipal Inspections. And I'm happy to talk to anybody, any resident that's interested in zoning. Zoning sometimes can be a dry topic. So thank you everyone for sticking with the PowerPoint. But like I said, if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out. We work for the town of Ashland. We work for you, the citizens of Ashland. So we are here to try to help answer any questions that you may have concerning zoning. So with that said, as Emma has requested that we use a raise hand button. So with that said, Mr. Mark Tassoni, do you want to lead us off with the first question?
Hey, thank you. Mark Tassoni, 49 Hawthorne Road. And great presentation, saying everything that is supposed to be said. And I'm gonna blow my own horn and say thank you for using the form-based codes in the buildings designs and everything, because I recognize them in the frontage and in the heights of the buildings. So I'll be quick. I know there's about 2 or 3 others that's gonna be coming on. But I'm just gonna say, what does take a while, some years, if people can be patient and just understand what's going on, it would be worth the while to be good with the boards and what goes on downtown. The roads are bumpy and somewhat drivable hazards is going to be smoothed out later. So I'm just going to end up on saying, as the author of the form-based code, and this is what I was putting forth, had town meeting back in 2014, 2015, had it passed and had the Attorney General pass it so it's in our books. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark. The note form-based code, always good stuff. The next person up, Miss H. Nicole.
Hi, yeah, I want to thank you too. That was a great presentation and I do appreciate it. So I have a few questions, and one, I was wondering if you could put up the underlying district, the map you had. I think Emma had said if someone wanted one of the presentation pages put back up.
Yep,
She's
just pulling it up. 1 second.
He's sharing the screen.
Yeah, so my first question is, this underlying districts seem to be very broken up. And I'm wondering why. It's like there's some over here, and then there's some over here, but there's some in the middle that aren't. And then there's some over here with some on either side that aren't. And I'm wondering how that got decided. And then also the special permits for certain roofs. Now I can see why, a flat roof might be more, I guess, complicated, I guess. I don't know. And I'm wondering if that's why it requires a special permit, and what would facilitate getting a special permit for one of those roofs. And I think I had another question, but I can't remember what it is right now. So anyway, so if you could just answer those two, it would be great. Maybe I'll remember the other one in the meantime.
Sure. So I can only theorize about why these districts were picked through my research, right? I've worked for the town. I've been lucky to be employed by the town of Ashland for 3 years now, a little over 3 years now. Looking at the overlay district, I believe that the town of Ashland was, with ADDA in downtown commerce. I mean, with the overlay district, the town of Ashland was trying to promote redevelopment of certain parcels and or sections, right? Number one, looking at Pleasant Street, that southern side tier of Pleasant Street is zoned industrial, and obviously it runs all the way down to the railroad tracks. Since I would say early 2010, early 2000s, there's been a huge swath in growth within form-based codes, right? As Mark alluded to, which is kind of moving away from the traditional Euclid zoning, which kind of has set up your historical residential, commercial, industrial zones, right? And so we've all heard the term of TOD, transit-oriented developments, mixed use, density developments along in the high transportation corridors, along transportation stops, train stops. The town of Ashland is home to one of the biggest or the biggest MBTA parking lot on the Worcester Boston lot. Obviously, COVID has changed the MBTA a lot and the ridership. However, looking back to this area, I believe that the overlay district in A was placed along Pleasant Street to stimulate, mixed use growth, linking the train station and the downtown with residential and commercial and or office space to try to attract the redevelopment in that area. Underlying zoning along the south side implied the southern side of Pleasant Street is industrial. Moving into the downtown core, 10 to 50 Main Street, Ashland Mills. That site is highlighted as ADDA, another industrial zone. And I think the town of Ashland was looking into the future to see what could be brought, what could a reinvestment into that property bring. And the town of Ashland was looking for a mixture of commercial, residential, and retail and offices, right? Or office space on that site. You know, it's a big site, and ADDA is the allows for the greatest flexibility within the zoning districts, and so I believe that was pinpointed. And then if you look at the other area within the core of the downtown, really from Nick's Pizza down to the train tracks, which would include the town hall, Ashland House, police station, fire station, Lunkers. And that is the area that was identified. And I can't speak to why that area was identified, but I believe it was really just the downtown core. And that's where of the main intersection, you know, the intersection of Main Street and Front Street is the front door, it's the doorstep of the town of Ashland, right? And it's the point of the highest traffic capacity, highest flow. And I think, you know, the people of Ashland, any redevelopment of that site was of the highest, was appropriate to be placed within ADDA. Moving down Front Street, I know there was a previous project proposed for that area prior to the town purchasing that land, where the Ashland Ashland Farmers Market is located. And so that is just the center core of the town. And that's what I have believed that's what I believe, that's what I can best pinpoint why the town of Ashland had these certain spots and or parcels that have been particularly chosen to be ADDA.
Yeah, actually, I did remember too. So the other question I wanted to ask, so in these specific areas, I think you said something about they have the two different types of zoning and that the owner of the property could choose between which type of zoning. Can you explain that a little bit better?
Sure. So when you have an overlay district, that is a layer that goes on top, right? So it's another designation. So really, within all overlay districts, you have two designations. You have your base zoning, and then you have your secondary designation, which is your overlay district. And so for a parcel that is within the overlay district and redevelopment wanted to occur or was sold, the developer and or owner, property owner, could obviously continue on with the base zoning, which would be industrial use, which would be allowed, which uses would be allowed within the industrial zoning code and or uses. However, if one was going to permit a project, a mixed use project, you would have to use the ADDA as the vehicle for permitting. And so it really depends upon which type of project and or what you're trying to build. But I hope that kind of explained it a little bit, but you have it's almost two designations. One lays on top of the other, but your base zoning is almost your Euclid zoning, which is residential, commercial, industrial. Then your overlay is almost your form-based code and new type of zoning, which allows it allows for a special project to take place, right? The two projects that I can pinpoint, no projects have used ADDA for development. The two projects that have been proposed and built, 21 Main Street and 128 Main Street, are both in ADDC, if that's correct. ADDB, not ADDA. So has ADDA been tested? No. However, it was really to be it's there for a promotion of a special project, I would say. And then
And
to
then-
go back to your flat roof question.
Yeah.
I think the planning board was just, I think the planning board going through the details into the studies. Emma, could you go back to the slide with the 6 buildings? The people of Ashland really like buildings with roof lines, right? And buildings that historically represented what was here in Ashland, right, over the years. There are historically mansard roofs within our downtown, and they're great and they're designed. However, I think the planning board, looking at the development of 128 Main Street and seeing the facade, seeing the mansard roof. Mansard roofs can be done very nicely, and I think that depends on the level of detail one puts into the roof and how it's built. Very historical mansard roofs have very fine detail, angles. It sometimes has a real kick out, kind of like a witch's hat at the bottom with a really swooping angle. And so I think the planning board is really, not speaking for them, but having worked with them, they were looking for if one was going to allow a mansard roof and or a flat roof, the detail of that roof is going to be to meet a high standard and or a high criteria of architectural elements. And so I think the planning board with a special permit, they have a little bit more, they have more control, right, over what that mansard roof is developed into. And so regarding details and design elements. And so I think that's why the planning board decided to make mansard roofs and flat roofs allowed by a special permit to have a better say of details, scale, design. On the other side, roofs with historical angles, with the historical pitches were allowed by right. And those are the roofs that people liked out of our survey with MAPC. And so that was something that we obviously, the planning board obviously allowed by right. But I think that was the give and the take. That was part of the give and the take between the two and between the flat and the angled roofs. Going back into time between the difference. So that helps shed some light on the
Yeah, so so it's, to get a special permit isn't necessarily difficult. You just have to prove that you're not putting something in that's more out of character with what's already there. So what you're saying, that's what I'm asking. Is that what you're saying?
Well, a special permit within zoning. So a special permit, you need a supermajority vote of the board. Those are changed. Traditionally, it's a supermajority vote of the board. Right now, the legislature changed a couple of voting elements within special permits from a statewide, not to get too deep into the details. But still, the special permit has to meet some pretty high standards and the criteria of the town, right? And so the developer, if proposing a mansard roof or a flat roof, have to meet, there's 6 points of criteria for all special permits in the town. And I know we're running out of time and someone patiently has been waiting. But are they hard to get? Yes and no. It does take a majority, super majority of the vote, depending on the project. And the developer really has to prove that it meets the criteria of the town, that historically meets what the elements are of the community and what the community wants. And so the community has a lot at stake within the design of its downtown. And so really the proof is in the pudding. If a developer can present a high quality building with architectural scale, mass, elements, design that the planning board can approve, then yeah, the project can move forward. But it's a way for the planning board to request and promote, drive, and or help drive the architectural elements of the community and that what the community want as a whole. But yes, a special permit is a special permit, and the design should be special to the town of Ashland. And should make, and that's what it really should hit upon. I don't know how else to explain it, but the design needs to be special and special for the town of Ashland.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. The next person with their hand up would be Joan. Joan, please feel free and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello?
Hi. Yes, thank you very much for this presentation. It was very informative. I really appreciate it. I did have a couple of questions. One is, when we talked about parking, you said, that you used the term section 55.1. Do you know what, so 75% of 5.1, what is 5.1? So what does that mean in real terms, I guess?
So theoretically, and I have my bylaws in front of me, excuse me for not looking you in the eye or at the camera. What I can, but the section 5.1 is our parking bylaws, and these kind of get into how many parking spaces, you know, a dwelling unit needs and or a restaurant needs. And so for quick numbers, right? Say a building is, you know, you're going to promote 100 units, right? Our bylaws call for 2 spaces per unit. So if you're going to promote 100 units of residential housing, well, if you're going to, let me do it a little bit better. So if you're going to promote, 100, say it's 100 units, right? And it's all residential. The bylaws will require 200 parking spaces, right? In downtown residential area, in the downtown residential district, 75 spaces would therefore be needed. So therefore, 150 spaces would have to be built with those 100 units. Now, as you start building in, you know, commercial elements such as restaurants, and if it's a mixed use building, the formulas and the calculations get a little bit, obviously they get a little bit more complicated. But just from a concept standpoint, from a conceptual standpoint, it's a reduction in parking to allow and to promote people to drive less, to walk a little bit more, to create more, you know, a pedestrian friendly community, and to you know, reduce parking. And so this is common within the Commonwealth, within downtown settings, but these were elements of the bylaw as adopted back in the 2015 time. So without getting too deep into the calculation element, it would be 75%, obviously, but 200 units, excuse me, 100 units, 150 parking spots.
Okay. Okay, I guess my concern would be that you're putting, people are going to have cars, and where they're going to go, and you're going to lose if you don't add parking instead of taking it away. That would be one concern. But my other question is, does ADDA supersede like the River Act? You know, one area like the river that goes behind downtown that has requirements too. So would this supersede that, or would the River Act supersede it?
No, that river is considered a wetland, and that's under the jurisdiction of the Ashland Conservation Commission. And so no, the zoning bylaws do not oversee any wetland protections and or the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction. That river is within the conservation jurisdiction, and any permitting within the proximity of 100, you know, within their jurisdiction of proximity, would have to follow all elements within our bylaws concerning wetlands conservation rules and regulations.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next hand up is Chris. Before you get going, Chris, we are at 7 o'clock. So if anybody else wants to ask a question, please feel free to raise their hand. But after Chris, we'll probably, you know, wrap up this the zoning session. So Chris, please unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, great. So thank you for the presentation. I have a question with regards to traffic. Just knowing where the industrial zones are, for instance, the Magunko Road, Pleasant Street, we already have, I mean, we have gigantic trucks that are cutting through. If you look at your districts, cutting through residential neighborhoods, driving to these areas down Cherry Street, down Pleasant Street, over the Corderville Street Bridge. So does it consider that, or do we look at those types of things? And I'm not talking developers necessarily traffic study, but our own traffic study. It's just and I understand and I appreciate Mark's comments, and we do all have to be patient. But what we're seeing now, I mean, it's just a matter of when somebody gets hurt, not if. So I just wanted to see your thoughts on that.
You bring up a great point, right? And obviously having industrial districts, within densely settled downtowns, there's obviously pros and cons with that, right? I can tell you that all projects typically and/or all projects really or the large scale in size have to go through a high degree of traffic analysis, right? And so with any redevelopment project, we do ask for traffic studies. Those are peer reviewed, and we can do our best. And those are the elements that we kind of rely on as a town to help understand what is going to be there. Obviously, industrial districts have trucks that come and go. And obviously Pleasant Street to Corderville Road is used as the main artery to get to the Mass Pike. Obviously Myrtle Street, the Myrtle Street Bridge it has a weight capacity limit, and obviously the terrain of Myrtle Street going to the Framingham is fairly hilly. The planning board does look at traffic, but traffic studies are required. And I think any project of industrial use and or truck or high trucking magnitude would require a plan of how one gets to and from the highway and how one is going to maneuver within these kind of high density residential areas. But those are the two elements that the town relies upon regarding trucking and routing.
I guess another question would be, who determines, like, are we getting to the point where we need to start considering making some of these side street one-way streets? I don't see a lot of input from the DPW director on these meetings. I've been to several of them. I haven't seen any input from him. I know his feelings, but I haven't heard any of it. We have a new police chief coming to town. I'd like to hear what she has to say. I know she has traffic experience. I appreciate this very, very much. It's great to have a better understanding, but I think before we start giving these special permits and permits at all and bringing, hundreds, if not thousands of more people to these apartments that the town wants to build, something has to be done, Peter, in my opinion. Emma, please. I mean, it really, I live down here. I live downtown. So I see it, and I see it every day. And it's just, it is not getting better. It is not getting addressed. It's just it's become Thunderdome. So that's my feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the feedback. Really, it's great to hear that. Roadways as a response, obviously there's a traffic roadway safety committee in the town of Ashland, and that I'm a part of, and I'm happy to bring that put that on the agenda. And Chris, I would invite you to, attend any of those meetings. I think it's a great future. It's a great study that the town can undertake. The planning, and I know a lot of towns can and have, and can do this. But yeah, I can bring that attention, to the traffic safety committee. And it's a great point. Okay, Mark, you put your hand up again. And I'm going to assume that Chris, hopefully we answered your question. So, or listen to your concern. So, Mark, do you want to make a final statement before we wrap this up?
Yes, I do. And all good questions from the participants there. And I thank you, Chris, for being patient and living in downtown. And I appreciate a little shout out there. Thank you. But I want to bring up two things. Hopefully they're quick in the answers. We're doing the downtown zoning. Is or is not traffic study involved? That's one question.
As looking at the downtown zoning district,
Yes.
was a traffic study done back when it was adopted?
Is it done or is it still going on?
The traffic study.
Yes.
I think, I don't know if it's been, I don't know, Mark, really. I think, I think a traffic study can be done in the downtown. I think it needs to come a little bit further along with the redevelopment or the reinvestments that the town is making in the downtown to see what happens. But I think a traffic study can be done. The citizens of Ashland would like to see how the town of Ashland, how the downtown can be a safer, pedestrian-oriented community. And is there a possibility to limit trucks and capacity and routes? I think a study can be done to try to implement some of those safety measures.
Okay, and to add that on, I got one after this and it'd be it. The traffic study, it has to do with my question about the parking, because 7, 8 years ago, when this was first being thought of, we were thinking about the parking and how to make the streets a little more safer when people park on streets. So downtown parking, where people parking on street, we used to have that back in the 70s and 80s and all, but now because there's more traffic going through, the parking is parallel, not slanted. What used to be slanted was by the railroad tracks. So that's why I was asking about the traffic study. And my last question, which I don't know if it's going to be answered or not, is the comprehensive plan involved in this? That's my last question.
I can say, so the comprehensive plan was last completed by the town of Ashland in 2003. The select board and the planning board are in conversations about taking the steps forward to update that plan, to recreate that plan. And yes, as a town, as the downtown, as the heartbeat of the town of Ashland, the downtown and the downtown zoning would be a big part of that comprehensive plan. And traffic would be a big part of that comprehensive plan. And I think going into parking in the downtown, I think, yeah, a parking study of the downtown, what municipal lots are available, street parking, truck routing, streets and traffic. Streets number one, and that kind of falls into the realm of the select board. Parking areas fall into the realm of select board, DPW. But I think as a whole, parking, traffic flow, parking on the street, any of those all those elements as a whole would be, yes, part of the master, part of a comprehensive plan, a master plan, two different terms, same meaning. But yes, all together, those would be analyzed. And those could be analyzed, at a more distinct, defined level within the downtown zoning district. And these elements have been put together, and we're starting to see, obviously we're seeing the town is making a very big investment. And I think if appropriate, the town can look to do a little bit more, in-depth study of truck routing, street parking and parking, within the community. That hasn't been undertaken before, but it definitely is done throughout Massachusetts and throughout the planning community for downtown planning. So without seeing any more hands up, I want to thank everybody for attending. I was happy to do this. This is the first time that we've held one of these in a long time or since COVID. I think it's great. And I think maybe we can do something, more, annually, to have these little planning sessions and touch upon different topics, indoor hot topics, within planning. So, yes, we are in Zoom, but if anybody would like to meet Emma and or I in person, like I said, we're in town hall. We're happy to answer any and all questions that one may have. We're very nice people. We're even though we deal with zoning every day, development, hopefully people know Emma and I in the community is friendly people that are approachable and that one can talk to. So thank you, Mark, for the thumbs up. So, but with that said, thank you all for attending. Like I said, if you have any questions, my email is pmatchak, my last name, MATCHAK @ashlandmass.com. And all my contact information is on the town website. So with that said, thank you so much for attending. And Emma, thank you so much. Great job, as always. And good night. And everyone stay safe. So
Thank you.
have a good one. Bye-bye.